Hello, everyone. This is Michael Felsher. I'm a DVD producer and filmmaker, and this is a special audio commentary track for the movie Schyko 3. I'm very pleased to be here today with the film's screenwriter, Mr. Charles Edward Pogue. How are you, sir?
I'm great, thank you.
So I guess we should start off just right off the beginning here. How did you get involved in this project?
I got involved with it. I had just finished The Fly, writing my draft of The Fly, and it was floating around town. Everybody was asking about it, and and having me in for meetings, and so they brought me in to interview for Schyko 3, and I believe I was probably the first guy in. I don't know. They sort of asked me, to come in, and I'm going, oh gosh, what do you do with Schyko 3? So I prepared myself. I watched Schyko and Schyko 2. I had no ideas. I basically went in to hear their ideas, if they had any ideas or any direction they wanted to go. They had nothing. They said, well, come back with an idea. And I got out in the parking lot, and suddenly the whole picture sort of came into view for me. And within a week, I was back with a very detailed pitch for it. I actually had two versions of it. One where Janet Leigh was going to reprise come back as a psychiatrist who was the double that Diana Scarewood ends up being in the version that we have.
Oh, really?
They all thought that Miss Leigh was a bit too long in the tooth for that. I mean, it's the usual Hollywood dynamic where you can have an ancient leading man as long as he's with a hot young girl. So I went to option 2, which was the runaway nun version here. But she was going to be a psychiatrist that was helping Norman with his transition originally. But a lot of the plot beats and everything were pretty much the same.
Was there any desire from Universal or sort of in their marching orders to you to directly connect this to Schyko 2?
No, actually. And my goal was to directly connect it to Schyko 1. I mean, watching Schyko again, I'd always known it was a good movie. But I realized viewing it again, it was a great movie. And so, and my goal was to get back to a very Hitchcockian tone with it. And sort of, do homage to Hitchcock with it. The one thing I absolutely hated in Schyko 2 was the whole spool subplot. I don't like when you mess with the mythology. Mother has to be mother, not some aunt who comes in. So that was, I had to figure out how to straighten all that out.
So it was your idea essentially you do address the spool mythology here,
yes,
but you end up unraveling it at the end of it.
Yes, I wanted to bring it back to the original mythology where Norman's mother was his mother. It wasn't this aunt who suddenly appears in Schyko 2. Or whatever, whatever she was supposed to be, Mrs. Spool. I can't remember all the details of that.
So, other than that, probably, what did you think of Schyko 2? Obviously, you would have had to have watched that movie beforehand.
Yeah, I thought it was a fairly decent sequel. I had no problems with it. My biggest problem was, which is the same problem we had with it, which is where the powers that be, with Schyko 3, which was where we were suddenly had to ramp up the blood quota. It was that we were in the year of the dead teenager movie. Where it's not enough to kill somebody; you have to see the impaling and the liver coming out of their back and whatever. And so I wanted to go back to the Hitchcock tone where everything was implied. That was my and that's, and if you read the script, that's exactly how it was played. And then it was, later on during the filming, Tony got the edict from the Black Tower that they wanted to see more visceral effects.
One thing about the movie that I noticed when I went back and rewatched it again is that the film, Norman's sort of a lost soul, and so are all the other people in the film. Mm-hmm. They all seem to converge on the Bates Motel, all from various points in their lives. Did you enjoy sort of creating the idea of every character in this movie has sort of lost their direction, and they all end up somehow forming a connection at the most unlikely of places.
Very, very much so, and it was very intentional. I mean, the other thing I wanted this love story with these two fractured people, this poor, confused nun and Norman, both two people who are trying so hard to be good and do the right thing, and just circumstances just work against them all the way down the line. But and then yes, the Jeff character. I wanted the Jeff Fahey character, Dwayne. I needed a red herring to say, is Norman doing the killings or isn't Norman doing the killings? And I wanted that sort of. I think in the Janet Leigh version, he may have actually been the killer. I can't really remember that far back. I have a files and boxes full of every note, every outline, every draft of a script, every random idea I wrote down on a napkin in a restaurant. I have them all filed somewhere, but I haven't gone back and investigated.
So I actually seem to recall in I think it was a Fangoria interview that you might have done right around the time of the film's release, you did remark that Dwayne was supposed to be the killer.
In one version, he was in a very early version. And again, I think that was the Janet Leigh psychiatrist version, which we jettisoned. Mm-hmm. But again, that it was never written. It never got past the stage of being a pitch outline, basically.
Talk about making. I thought it was very interesting. The other Psycho films, to a large degree, sort of avoided any sort of religious iconography, any kind of religious underpinnings to a lot of it. It was a few things here and there, but it was mostly implied right off the bat by making Maureen a nun. You bring God into this in a pretty big way.
Yeah.
Why did you have that idea?
Oh gosh, I don't recall. I just I again, it was this person who's hemmed in, who is in her society is sort of regarded as a pariah, and I like that whole thing. But again, the whole God thing, it hit me very early on. I know in the one thing I had was that, which we'll see later, is that reversal where Mother goes in to kill her. Mm-hmm. And she sees the image of the Virgin Mary. I couldn't begin to tell you where that came from. I'm not Catholic. I'm not particularly religious, which may be one of the reasons I play fast and loose with it and don't I don't feel like I'm stepping on anybody's toes. At least it doesn't bother me. But again, she's coming from a very strict background, very strict beliefs, which suddenly she's defying and is an outcast. I think we just missed the scene where she kicks the little Jesus off of the dashboard there.
I had never really noticed that before. It was just
Well, that was very intentional. It's in the script, and
So the casting of Diana Scarwood was very critical to this film. It's a very important role. What did you think of her performance and what she brought to the Marine character?
She and I hit it off the first time we met. I wasn't in that particular casting session or discussions about that. We met at Jeff Fahey had just done Silverado, and he was having a Silverado Psycho 3 party. We were just about ready to start, and I walked into that party, and Diane came immediately, glommed onto me, and took me off, and we were having discussions about the character. She really loved the script. She loved the character. She loved the nuance of the character, and we were just in simpatico through. So I have nothing but praise for her performance. Of course, and the great devastating opening line, "There is no God." Would that I had written that. That was Diana's little inspiration.
Hmm.
It's it's just a thing of a really good actress taking what she's got and building on it, and so I was pleased. Now, the scene we're seeing here, this scene with the birds and the hotel, the desolated hotel,
Yeah.
this was actually the opening of the movie.
Oh, really?
All the scenes in the convent were there. It's just that Tony changed the order of everything. And this, which is where I wanted to start out with these, the desolate hotel and the birds dropping, he reversed the order and started with her journey and then brought us into the Bates Motel. And I'm not sure that he's not right about that.
Well, I've always loved the opening to the Bates Motel material. There's no dialogue. It's a very silent piece.
Yeah.
Where we're just getting to see Norman in his kind of back to his old habits again.
Yeah.
With the taxidermy and everything. And I find this... were you tempted to write in anything here, or just kind of just go along with...
No, I mean, if you look at the first 4 or 5 pages of the script, which is all this stuff that you're seeing now, that's the way it was. I just wanted, us to be introduced to Norman and, the whole quirky thing with the bird feeder. And I love it when he takes that spoon.
Yeah, it's a little...
he's been stuffing birds with. But getting back to that taxidermy, because we always should see the taxidermy, but we never see him doing any of it.
Right, yeah.
And then here threading in the background of all this spool material that I was going to have to deal with. I wanted to set that up and get that going.
You were having to unspool it.
Yes, as
the
case may be.
I had to say it. Sorry, folks. I'm really sorry.
That's all right. But I loved. He's so quirky and so bizarre here. It's just. Norman just, freaking out. But then you see this moment here where he's very gentle and, when he realizes one of the birds isn't poisoned and he takes it out and lets it go.
These moments build up a lot of sympathy for Norman, again, right off the bat. You see that this is not a guy who's just, and he never was, your typical villain, your typical bad guy. He's not the bad guy.
No, I mean, one of the reasons this appealed to me, I'm not a horror guy per se. I mean, it's odd that my first 2 big studio films would be horror films, but what appealed to me about The Fly and this one was that your protagonist is also your antagonist. It's very classic Jekyll Hyde, and again, getting back to Norman and the religion theme that I am of the opinion that all great horror stems from 2 things. Which is either emotional or sexual repression. So that may have been what prompted the whole, to get back to your question about the religious thing and the nuns, it's just that sense of repression. I mean, this is why the Victorians were so good at writing horror, because they were such a repressed
repressed people, yes.
Yeah. So, and that's what's, Norman here. I mean, all his problems stem from mommy and his emotional stunted life and all that. So
that's true. And Maureen's had her own experiences with that because she's been a nun. So the one whole aspect of her life has been completely repressed.
Exactly. And so, bringing those 2, like I say, fractured souls together was a real interesting to me thing. Actually, it's very interesting. There was a review that came out when this was released the same year that The Fly was released, the same summer, 1986, I believe.
Yeah, it was 86.
And there's a guy in one of the L.A. alternate newspapers out there, film reviewer there, who said the 2 best love stories of the summer were The Fly and Schyko 3. Nowhere in his article did he make the connection of the one joint thing that bound them together, which was me.
But interesting that he would pick up on that.
They're would, but
very unconventional love stories, but very much love stories nonetheless.
Yes, exactly.
Now, the Dwayne character I've always found interesting. I've seen Psycho 3 numerous times, and there's actually times with that character that I feel he's not that bad a guy. He's clearly someone with, dubious morals at many key points in this movie. But the way Fahey plays him, there's times where you actually have some sympathy for him. Was that intentional on your part?
Jeff again, he has that just terrific charm, and and I kind of wanted this charming sleazeball. He has to sort of be attractive, I think in a way. Although he seems to strike out with women, doesn't seem to have a great deal of luck with them. But again, he's a guy who's thwarted in his dreams and his ambitions. Now, this is something that this moment here where they're eating the corn. Uh, I asked Tony. I said, "What was it you were eating in Psycho?" And he says it was candy corn.
Mm.
And I had a close up that I really wish he'd used, which is you watch him bite off the yellow top, and then the middle, and then the section, and then the last section. He bites them off in these little sections, and to me, it just played to his precision and that weirdness, that off kilter weirdness that he has. But if he filmed it, it didn't end up in the final cut.
So I guess we should. I mean, I put it off a little while just because I know it's a big subject. But Anthony Perkins himself, you were working with him obviously to play Norman Bates because who else could play it? And also he was taking on the role of director for this movie.
Yes.
So that had to have been and I've heard from some older archival interviews with him that it was very difficult for him to do both. And yet at the same time, he felt very strongly that he should be the one to direct the movie. What were your initial impressions of him when you first met him? When did you first meet him?
Well, I was told by the people that Tony wanted to direct. He loved the script so much, and he thought it was all there, that he felt that he was the guy to direct it. And I guess there was some question or negotiations going on, and they were saying, well, if this doesn't happen, we'll have to make it Tony's nephew or something. I said, I'm dreading the thought. But fortunately, they arrived at a thing where I guess a contractual thing, and he was the director. And I met him. I'm trying to remember. I know we met at some casting sessions, but I did go up to his house for a session with the script to talk about the script at one time. And I can't remember whether it was the casting sessions or the script sessions came first. But again, he was so. Our script discussions were just going through flipping pages, and he's going, "This is great. This is great." I mean, he had the minimal notes, and I will talk about later when we get to it. The one big disagreement we had, which was so civilized, it was like a Noel Coward conversation. It really wasn't a it was a disagreement, but it wasn't an argument or anything. But I loved Tony. Tony, first of all, he's incredibly smart. I mean, I always say he was so smart, he was scary, but in a good way. I mean, he could really shake up your thinking and make you see things in a different way. Sometimes he'd get very outre, and you'd have to sort of pull him back. But I get these phone calls at night, and he'd say, "What if we did such and so?" And I'm going, "I don't know, Tony." But then we'd meet somewhere in the middle. We'd always find a way to do things he wanted to do. And there's moments in this film that I just go, "Oh, he takes my breath away with a little touch or a shot that delights me." But we both are from the theater, so we had a common lexicon there, and a common language, and a way of looking at the material. I think that is not always the way it's regarded in film. Theater people just have a greater respect for the written word, and there was. We have these long speeches here right in this banquet scene that we're having with Roberta Maxwell and him in the diner. And, most people look at this and say, "Can we cut this speech down to 4 lines?" And I'm going, no. I mean, what he's saying here is important. And, Tony, he never questioned any of that. I mean, he's an actor. He can handle dialogue, and he knows the point and purpose of it and how to deliver it. And so does Roberta, who's a fine theater actress. Every moment I had with Tony was a pleasure. He was a gentle. He's one of those true gentlemen in the film business, which you meet far too few of. But I had nothing but infinite respect for him. I enjoyed every minute we worked together, and his brain was brilliant. Very, very smart man.
It's interesting that he would have so few notes on your script, because you have to believe that at this point he would have had to have felt, and I think rightfully so, that no one else would have understood Norman Bates as well as he would have.
Well, I think that's true, and I think that's partly why he wanted to direct this script, because if I may, pat myself on the back, my focus in writing this script was his performance. All these little ticks and things he's doing right now in this scene, all that little hesitations and things were things that I mean, they're almost in the script, with ellipses and things like that. I'm trying to capture his speaking patterns and things like that. And so I felt after I'd read the first two scripts, and again, much more strongly with Schyko, because that's what I was going back to. But again, his performance throughout both films is, he's the center of the movie. And so I wrote it. It's the first time I'd ever written for an specific actor. And so, you have to sit there and take his performance and tailor your script to that.
When did you mentioned before that The Fly and Psycho 3 were the same summer. Was this filmed after The Fly?
This was, I'm trying, I went into the meetings on this. I'd written The Fly before, but The Fly stayed in development hell, and there were directors on and off of it. And I think this was even filmed before The Fly. It was like the summer of 85. I think it was filmed, and The Fly was filmed later.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, this one actually, it had a quicker path to fruition than The Fly did.
Yeah, some films happen immediately, and others take years to get going.
Yeah.
So you were, in a very short period of time, had experiences with two very, very different but yet equally beloved figures in the horror genre. That being with Anthony Perkins, and then from David Cronenberg on The Fly.
Well, but with Cronenberg, I really had nothing to do with it. Cronenberg rewrites by himself, so I didn't. There was no collaboration. He took my script and rewrote it, and then went off to Canada to shoot the movie. I mean, I didn't meet Cronenberg till like a month after the film had opened.
Oh, really?
Really? Stuart Kornfeld, my producer, called me and said, "Would you like to meet Cronenberg?" And I said, "Well, we have a hit movie that it might be a good idea." So that's and we met in a bar and had a drink, and he's again a very nice man, and what he did with The Fly was it's kind of an iconic horror film these days. So I don't begrudge anything that happened with that.
Does that usually happen with screenwriters? You find that when sometimes they buy the script and it's like sayonara to what your opinions are, and they just go off and do your own thing, or?
Well, I must say, Stuart Kornfeld, my producer on that, always tried to keep me in the loop. I mean, but there was bigger, it was Brooks Films that did it, and I'm sure Mel had a lot to do with it. And again, Cronenberg he goes off and does his thing. So, it's not that I was rudely dismissed or anything. I mean, it was just that he was going with his thing, and I was probably off writing another movie at that point in time. So, sometimes you're available to go on a set, and sometimes you're not, and sometimes they want your input, and it just depends on the various, powers that be, that how well you're welcomed in it, the process. It's not something that any writer likes to be dismissed out of.
Right.
But
well, sometimes things just take a course,
Yeah, exactly. And again, like I say, sometimes you're on to other projects, and you got bigger fish to fry at the moment when it finally comes down.
So on Psycho 3, it sounds certainly like you had much more of a day-to-day involvement with Anthony Perkins on the film.
Yeah, I mean, I was, they shot it on the back lot. So even though I was probably writing another script at the time, I was always welcome to come over, and I would go over usually 10 or so in the morning and watch for a couple hours, and then they'd break for lunch, and I'd eat lunch, and they used to watch the dailies during lunch, so I'd watch the dailies and I'd go home. I'm not I can find watching movies to be like grass growing sometimes.
Oh
So
yeah.
I don't need to be on the set every minute, as long as things are going well. I would go over, and my reward is to go over and hang out with the actors, because I used to be an old actor and things like that, and just shoot the shit and have some fun, and then go home. I don't really want to work while it's being filmed.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, a lot of people don't seem to realize that movie making is a lot of hurry up and wait.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of a flurry of activity than just a lot of standing around waiting for something to happen.
Right. I mean, it's probably why I never became a director, although I had offers and things like that. It's just, I don't have that kind of patience for it. I don't want to deal with all the minutia that a director has to deal with. I can write, say they go to the castle, and then the director has to figure out what that castle looks like, and sit with the designers and all that kind of stuff. I don't.
Yeah, they have the hard part, realizing what you came up with.
Yeah, exactly.
How big a budgeted project was this, or would you even know? Really, did they have to chop anything out of the script?
No, the only I mean, there are scenes that got cut, but it was, it wasn't for budgetary concerns. I always have this battle with timers. I write a very dense script.
Mm-hmm.
It's very florid. It's like people say they're like reading novels, which in that they mean that in a good way, but it's a very dense script. So my scripts always come in long, and then timers get a hold of them and say, well, this is what they said about Schyko was it was a 2 hour and 20-minute movie, and I said, no, it's under 2 hours. Well, they cut their 20 minutes out of it, and it ended up being a 98-minute movie. So I was right, they were wrong, but that happens a lot. They think. They adhere to this minute a page thing, which is not necessarily true. I mean, you can have a half a page of description of something, and it takes 3 seconds on a screen, or you have a page of dialogue that goes yes, no, what, I thought you said no, and that takes up a page, and it takes what it take 20 seconds for me to say that. So they get having been a performer and acting. I used to be an actor before I was a writer. Everything gets acted out aloud. I read my scripts aloud, and I act them, and I time them, and so I'm very conscious of performance and how long something takes usually.
The reporter character, Tracy Venable, that Roberta Maxwell plays, I found it interesting, and I've always been curious about whether this was intentional or not. She should be viewed, I guess, objectively as a heroine in this. She's the one trying to get to the bottom of a series of murders in this town, but I actually kind of hate her for most of this movie, and I kind of wish she would just leave Norman Bates alone. Is that sort of what you were going for? Because we have such sympathy for Norman that we really, in a weird way, don't want anything bad to happen to him.
Well, she was, again, a very desperate character. She's looking at the Bates, and that was certainly intentional, is that she's looking for the big story to promote her into a higher class journal than doing whatever it was, the magazine Coastal Highways or whatever she was writing for. She has that same desperation that everybody else has here in this movie, which makes her drive. So the drive was there, but I think it was, we looked at a lot of young ingenue types and more glamorous types, and Anthony, I guess, knew Roberta from the theater. And again, she is brilliant, brilliant actress. And he went with this older woman, not quite as glamorous, and had a real edge to her, which I think makes Tracy's desperation even more desperate, because she's not getting any younger, If it had been an eager beaver 20-year-old who was ambitious, it's a little different than an older woman who's looking for kind of her last chance to hit the big time, you know? So I guess that, I think he just, and that's what I liked about him. He could take those offbeat kind of casting choices and give it a whole new spin.
Yeah, because she comes off as someone who's been, you could buy her desperation of having been stuck doing a bunch of crap jobs for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah,
she does. Yeah, there's a certain cravenness to her,
right.
That she's just looking for the big story, even though she's actually stumbling onto something that does need to be solved.
And how many people she, smashes along the way is irrelevant to her. He's so tortured. This scene of him watching.
Well, again, his repressed desires, he can't help
yes,
it.
Yes, it really is. What mother did to this poor boy. And this is one of those moments that Tony did that I love, where the door jamb becomes that knife edge. It's a terrific little moment, and only his mind would have come up with it.
Because you have sort of a difficult assignment with this movie in that there's no mystery really, at least I don't think there's supposed to be any real mystery as to who Mother is here. We know that Norman has gone around the bend again, and he's pretending to be his mother. So the mystery then becomes a whole a series of separate murders, whether Norman is actually being sort of, it's like someone doing the same thing he's doing without him realizing it.
Yeah, and again, it's dealing with his. The Psycho is the mystery. Who is this mysterious woman who comes in and slashes people? Here we're dealing with Norman's angst all the way through. I love this is one of the moments I think that caught everybody. they love this. They love this reversal. I do too, if I immodestly may say so. He goes to kill her, and it becomes a whole nother thing.
Maureen was must have been a very interesting character to write, because she's not your typical damsel in distress. She, in her own ways, is screwed up as Norman is.
Well, yeah, she is. They're both looking for peace, and they for a short while they think they've found it with each other, and maybe if the reporter and Jeff Fahey and Mama had left them both alone, they would have found it. But it's.
Was there any concern with either you or with Anthony Perkins about, because it's not, there's definitely a deep connection between the Maureen and Norman characters, but there's never anything overly sexualized about it. It goes to a certain level and then it just doesn't go any further. Were you concerned about that seeming a little bit inappropriate, or kind of just like, well, would this really be, is this realistic that an older man and this young a woman would be together under these circumstances?
Well, I actually found this relationship a lot more realistic than the Meg Tilly one.
Well,
I think, but again, I think where they bond is they're both wounded creatures, and I think that's where they bond with their wound. He sees someone who needs him, who needs help, which is very different from a very sexual woman like Janet Leigh coming in, with her 1950s bombardier brawl and things like that. So it's not an intimidation thing for him. It's a gentler thing, which I think is basically, his nature is to be gentle, I think, in a way.
And it does, in a weird way, the Bates Motel has a long history of attracting lost souls to it.
Yes, exactly. And this is. There were actually two hospital scenes here. We had this one, and there's one that came later. this is one of the things that Diana and I talked about actually in the initial meeting, because we had already we collapsed the two into one, and she and I both felt that we needed the second one, just because there was an evolution and a progression of her character and Norman's relationship. Because as it is now, it happens a tad abruptly. But there was this thing. There was he visits her here, and then he visits her again later on, and we see that group that relationship grow a little bit. And I just we both felt that I'm sure it would have helped her as an actress just to have had that scene, to have that moment of we see the relationship blossom a little bit more.
What did you observe about Anthony Perkins as a director? How was he with the actors, and how was he in terms of? Because one thing the movie has a very distinct feel from, say, Psycho 2. This is not a film that feels like an imitation, or even really an imitation of what Hitchcock did. It has a very noirish feeling at times, very black comic feel at times, and there's
very well, and again, those are things I think that he and I sort of were in simpatico with, because I am a noirish kind of guy. It's almost impossible for me to, I'll do something bloody and horrible and then make a joke about it. So it does have that black comedy feel about it too, which I think is. I mean, sometimes I refer to it as a noir comedy. It's because it's a very funny movie, very much so. At times. And but the first thing Tony did was he took his crew. I can't remember whether the cast was there or not. I don't think they were, but a crew was, and he showed us Blood Simple.
Oh, okay. Well, that can see the connection there.
And I mean, Carter Burwell, who did the score, I think his first score was Blood Simple, and when he showed us that, I just sort of heaved this huge sigh of relief. I said, "Oh, he gets it, man. He knows the tone." Yeah, this is another one of those great moments. It's just so far out theatrical. He closes the door in the hospital and he's in Mother's bedroom. I mean, that's not a cinematic moment. That's a theater moment. But I love it. I think it's just really an interesting moment.
The noir feel applies to just so many different scenes, but even earlier in the scene or the movie with the diner, which we had seen plenty of times in Psycho 2, it's lit completely differently. It's got a very dark, sort of, the light coming through the slats and the blinds,
Right. Well, we had Bruce Surtees, who was known as the Prince of Darkness, I believe. But so it has that very noirish, overtones to it, all that chiaroscuro stuff, and
Well, I was going to ask about Bruce Surtees, because sadly he's no longer with us, and he was a long-time cinematographer, a terrific one, and I think he does a fantastic job in this movie. How closely did he work with? What did you observe about the relationship between him and Anthony Perkins?
Well, on the set, they seemed to get along very well. I mean, Tony seemed to get along with everybody on the set. He was authoritative, but kind, and just I mean, again, he came armed with his smarts, and he also he valued other people's contributions. So I think he was a very generous director, and he had no ego about his directing. He wasn't there to. He was there to serve the script and to make the best movie he could. I mean, you'll notice that I believe this movie does not have a vanity credit. It's not a Tony Perkins film. It's because he didn't believe in that nonsense. It was, we were a team. It's here, team, come in and watch Blood Simple. But here's my idea of tone, and what this kind of should look like. He was sharing his ideas with everybody and wanted them to share their ideas with him. Lovely. He's just a lovely man. This film, it's not a perfect film, but I think of all my studio films, I'm the most fond of it because it was such a joy to work with him.
Well, he was a man who had come up. He was old school. He had come
Yeah,
up through the studio system and had a wide variety of parts, and then he plays this one role,
yeah.
which ends up defining his
All right.
whole career.
Here's another whole scene that's just so. I mean, again, his mind with Fahey and the lamps it's just and that garish, strange light. That it's so kinky. I mean, the dialogue is there and the scene is there, but all these little touches are I guess Tony and the actors. I don't know how they came up with the choreography of this scene, but it's wonderful.
But question on a scene like this: how much of this? How descriptive are you of this scene when you wrote it?
I mean, I don't. It was there. I can't remember all of it, but again, all the stuff with the lights and this kinky stuff here. I don't remember me. I know I didn't write. I would never come up in a million years with that stuff with the lights or her doing her little odd, strange striptease there. I mean, I think they were just making love somehow, and the dialogue was probably similar or the same. But
it has to be.
But this is what you want. You want the people to bring their touches to it. You want them to respect the nature and the point and purpose of the scene and the dialogue if it's good. This is. I remember this scene, the writing of this scene better than I do the other one, and this is kind of. But but the touches of, he just had sex with this hot naked babe here, and he's looking at men's magazines. I mean,
yeah, I'd never.
How perverted is this
picked
guy?
Up on the men's magazines.
And again, that's Fahey and Tony's work. That's not my work. I didn't do that.
Well, it's interesting. I've heard screenwriters talk before about how they'll write a scene of two people having a conversation, and then they'll see the director interpret it in such a way, and there's so many other elements that come into play. They're like, it's what I wrote, but in not at all at the same time.
Well, sometimes, I mean, again, you want them to add to what you've written without perverting the movement and the intention of the scene. And I can get very particular about my dialogue and the way it's constructed, again, because, as an actor, I can hear it in my head. I know what it's supposed to sound like. But I'm not, I'm not every if, and, but, I don't go crazy about that. Sometimes I will if it's a very specific, if it's doing something very specifically. Sometimes by just misplacing a word, you can ruin a joke or a line by transposing something. But there's paraphrases in this thing, and sometimes it's dead on. And you just and the paraphrases are sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. But for the most part, he gets the intention of every scene. This is the way we wanted to shoot all the scenes. Is we didn't want to see blood going in. We wanted to see things splashing on the telephone booth, her feet in the glass, those kinds of things. We didn't want to see a blade going into a body necessarily. I mean, again, the whole thing to me was the her in a confined space like the shower. With her clothes, her thing half on, she can't scream, and can't get away, and that sort of thing. And so that's what I looked for in some of these murders, to echo the original shower scene.
That brings up a topic that I wanted to discuss, in terms of Psycho being such an iconic film with so many moments that have become just part of the public consciousness or of the lexicon of film. How risky did you think it was for you, and how were you reluctant or sort of encouraged to have as many callbacks to the first film as possible?
I always believe that if you're going to do a sequel, that you have to, it's what can I bring to it? Can I make it? Can I legitimately add to it without diminishing it? Is my goal. And I think you always have to go back and and respect your source material, which is why, again, I hate the spool thing, because it's not respecting the mythology that we've already set up in an iconic film, you know? And so it's what can I bring to it? And it's always having respect. And again, I went back and not only watched the original film more than once, but I read Joe Stefano's script. And I got to tell you, it's all in the script there too. Now, I don't know how he and Hitchcock worked on that script, but Stefano's script is what Hitchcock filmed. And it was a great script. So you don't have to respect the literal stuff of the film, but particularly when you're adapting something, but in this case, which is a sequel, you want to respect the essence of what was originally there. I mean, it's an iconic film for a reason. And can I bring something new and interesting to it? Or am I just cannibalizing something to make a few bucks here? I mean, part of it also was that I was a young, hungry, up-and-coming screenwriter, and I found a way into this that worked for me and also made it interesting for me. Again, this whole thing of the antagonist, protagonist, these fractured people coming together. I said, there's meat on the bones here that interests me, that I can get passionate about this story. You know, that's and not diminish what has come before.
How did you feel when the movie was released? I remember very vividly, it was the summer of '86, and it came out, and there were some critics that were kind to it, but a lot of them seemed just very dismissive of it. It's almost as if they didn't even bother to see the movie. They saw the title Psycho 3 and said, well, what's the point of even giving this a fair chance?
Yeah, I think, and that was, I mean, if I had one reservation when I did it originally, it was the stigma of that Roman numeral 3, you know, which is, that can get very, it just people look at it and go, oh, they're just ripping it off again, you know. And which is, again, what I tried not to do. But there were also a lot of good notices. It got a lot of goodness, and it seems over the years that it has gotten much more respect. Mm-hmm. I read more good reviews than bad reviews of it. And I think they respond to a lot of the stuff that you respond to, which is Tony's quirky performance, the noirish black comedy aspects of it. When the script was making its rounds, I had a lot of people who were ardent Psycho fans who came up to me and really loved what I had done with the script. And that to me meant a lot, because it was people who really were in the know and knew and careful. It's great. I wish it had done better business, because they did ask Tony and me to do a Psycho 4, which I swore I would never do.
Well, they did approach you to do the fourth one.
Well, we actually were approached right after this was filming, I think, before it was released. We came up with we had an outline, which was, mostly me going to Tony and saying, "What do you think of this?"
Well, I got to ask what that outline was. I'm fascinated.
It was talk about a black comedy. It was a brilliant outline. Tony goes back to the nut house, and he has some radical therapy with a woman who takes a young mute girl to play the role play mother in it, and with him, and puts him in showers and sexual situations with her. It's very weird. But the place ultimately it burns down, and he and this young mute girl escape. He heads back to the motel, which in the meantime has been bought by this entrepreneur who's going to do one of those horror mystery weekends based in a very skewed fashion after the real history of it. And the actor who was going to play Norman Bates quits on him in a money dispute, and Norman arrives just in time to get hired to play himself. And we had a whole motel of, eccentric, weird people, and people start popping off, and you don't know who's doing the killing. And it was more kind of a mystery horror kind of thing, but it was very funny, and it was Again, very dark, very weird.
I can see why that might not have met with the reception you wanted at that particular time. 10 years later, maybe it would have.
Well, it was Tony and I both really liked it, and but it's a story I keep thinking, is there some way I can rework this into something to monopolize it? But we got paid generously just to come up with an outline for it, so that was kind of interesting.
And then they eventually they did do a Psycho 4, which went back and
yeah, and we got called in for that, and I threw the outline at whoever was doing it, and they wanted to go in a different direction, so our outline just sits on the shelf there and never happened.
What did you see the eventual Psycho 4?
I have not seen it. No, after 3 was the end for me.
That was it for you.
They weren't going to do my Psycho 4. I didn't want to see the new Psycho 4. So. It's kind of the way I am.
No, that's actually a lot of.
I mean, I wrote the first John Carter of Mars, believe it or not, back in 1987.
Wow.
And I have never seen the new movie that came out.
I think you're in a company with about 100 other people who have all been attached to that movie at some point. My God.
I wrote the first one. It has kind of a cult status with the Burroughs fandom.
Well, that's funny.
And but I loved that script. It was a wonderful script, and so I've just never really gotten involved with it ever since.
While we have an opportunity, I would like to kind of go back and just talk about how you got interested in screenwriting in the first place, and so you're a little bit about your background, because I don't know if fans know that much about you other than the films that you've written.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, again, I started out as an actor, theater actor, and that was what I was doing. I came out to Hollywood. It was kind of like starting all over again as an actor. So I sat down and wrote my first screenplay, which was a sword and sorcery epic. It got optioned, never got made, but got optioned. Eventually got me my agent, and that's how it happened. I had always been writing plays and various and sundry things, but when that script got optioned, I looked around while I was sitting there as an actor trying to get work. I looked around and said, well, what they really need is a screenplay. So I sat down and wrote one, and here, got an agent, got option, lived on the option money for a year. I said, well, this is easy. Maybe I should do more of this. And then I went over to England and did a couple of Sherlock Holmes films over there for a producer named Cy Wine. I don't know why this guy got this shot. The pianist got this shot in the movie. It's just the strangest cut.
He had a good agent, so he got some good coverage in there.
Tony a favor. Tony owed him a favor, I guess. I don't know. But anyway, so I went over and did these 2 very well-received Sherlock Holmes films that played cable. I did those for a producer named Cy Weintraub, who had owned the rights to Tarzan for years, believe it or not. And they were supposed to be, he was going to make a series of them, but those were the only 2 that ever got made. But they were sort of my calling card to the big studios, and that's how it started happening. It was great. Doing the Sherlocks were great over in England, because I was working with the cream of the crop of British theater over there.
Right,
Ian Richardson was my Holmes, and they were still the 2 most perfect movies that I've had made, probably.
Were you always interested in horror and sci-fi, or did that kind of come later? Or
I more fantasy than sci-fi, I would say. The horror, I like certain horror. I'm not a fan of the blood and guts kind of horror. I mean, my favorite horror movie, just put this in a reference point, is The Island of Lost Souls with Charles Laughton. So I don't know which is based on the island of Dr. Moreau. So I there's a lot of classic horror that I like. But I'm not, it's not my first choice if I'm going out to see a movie somewhere. I'd rather go see a swashbuckler or a cowboy movie. I mean, The Fly was brought to me by, I had a manager who said, here, you have a relationship at Fox, which I did at the time, and this movie needs to be remade. And that's how that, I'd never even seen The Fly before I wrote that screenplay. Now, this scene is kind of the prelude to what I think is the single biggest mistake in the movie. It's this scene where they've come back from their little dinner dance and are sort of fumbling toward some kind of romantic, i.e., sexual encounter here. And these two novices who are bumbling their way through it. And actually, in the initial way this was written, it's slightly. I mean, he's got basically the tone, but some of the dialogue's been changed, and the way it's written, she was more the aggressor than he is. Yes, because I wanted. He's a babe in the woods. I mean, if he had sex with Mama and you did see the impression in the bed somewhere here. It's either coming up or has already been seen once. But you get the idea that he slept with Mother, and she had to be the aggressor in that sort of relationship. And so I didn't want him making he wants to, but he can't. But you see here, the way he grabs her and kisses her, I had it just the other way around. I wanted her to be the aggressor because I just thought it worked better. But again, Tony knows the character, so maybe I'm wrong. But again, he's just going a little crazy here and twitching, and every neuroses that Norman has is sort of, popping out right now.
Well, it's I've always enjoyed the scene just because it's so sad because you can tell even from this point things are not going to end well here for anybody.
Yes, yeah. This is the doomed relationship, sadly.
Yeah,
but
and it's so unusual to see. A lot of screenwriters and a lot of filmmakers don't bother to get into the psychology of their characters enough that you could have a scene like this where you're watching it and it's not just about titillation or anything like that. It's about watching two very damaged people trying to find a connection with one another.
Exactly, and it is, it's the psychology is where the horror is for me, and this is the mistake. What we're supposed to go from is Norman going crazy, can't do anything, he's just twitching and going crazy, and then we dissolve, and it should be a shot of Maureen alone on this bed, and then a shadow descends on her, and you say, oh my God, she's alone on the bed, he's gone off, he's going to become Mother, he's going to come in and do damage to her. And you see a shadow on the wall over this lone figure on the bed, sleeping, and then we pan, and we see it's just one of these revelers from the homecoming party.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's played the whole scene backwards. It's his one directorial mistake, I would say. But we just missed that little red herring moment, where we're going to give you a shock or a scare, and it turns out to be nothing.
We have him having a very impassioned conversation with Mother.
Yeah, and he was very strange about how he does Mother's voice. You see him covering his mouth or turning away, or those kinds of things where you don't see him.
Well, he doesn't
talking.
cheat it. So I mean, it's actually
yeah.
We assume he's speaking it while we were not able to see him.
Right.
In writing those scenes, that had to have been a real fun thing to do, to try to get into the mindset of essentially the other half of Norman's mind.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you sit there and write out a conversation between the two parts of this man's psyche like that?
Well, I mean, that was the easy part. The tough part was what Tony had to do, which was staging it. I can write it and just say, you don't see his mouth, whatever, and but he has to figure out all the choreography and blocking for this thing. Now, this is one of those. This is a moment that just makes me cringe, makes my little sphincter shrink. I'll tell you, because what he's going to do here in a minute.
With the knife, yes, yeah.
Yes, I mean, I think I had him doing that, but him slamming his hand down and you hear that big chunk, you'd think every finger on his hand would be cut off,
I know.
And
again, that's what I love about that moment is it's not a gory moment, but it sure sells.
The sound, yeah.
Oh, it's just the idea of what he just did to himself.
I know.
Ugh.
we didn't talk about when she came home from the hospital and she had those two little bandages, just
Oh yeah.
deep cuts. And I don't know what Props was thinking there.
Well, they had to get her home pretty quick, and unfortunately, I don't know if it was an insert that was done later, but the shot of the blood actually coming out of her wrists.
Yeah, I think that may have been one of those. Oh, we gotta pump up the blood quotient for the studio things. But you do see her with those big, clunky things and the wrappings later on, and then you see these two little mini band-aids on her.
Well, she's a quick healer,
Yeah.
And then you have a scene like this, which is essentially just a setup for a murder sequence.
I think there may have been a few more scenes where the revelers, the homecoming weekend revelers, were threaded through. I can't remember, but may have ended up on the cutting room floor. But because I wanted to see this hotel or motel filled one weekend, which just because you never do. And
no, you never ever do.
Yeah, and also it just makes it harder for him as a murderer to maneuver if he's got a crowd of people running around the place going crazy all the time. But we owe this scene that's coming up to Frank Price, who was head of Universal at the time. And when I went in to do my final pitch to get Frank's okay, it was Frank who he was talking about unique ways we have to murder somebody. And he jokingly said, well, on the toilet. And I just glommed on it. I said, that's genius. I said, where else are you more vulnerable than sitting on a toilet with your pants around your ankles? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and, and so I did my damnedest to say, I'm going to write that scene. I'm going to write that murder. Because I hadn't had all the murders. I knew who was dying, but I didn't know exactly how they were happening. This one was one where I didn't know where this girl was going to be. I knew she was going to be murdered, but I didn't know where.
Well, this scene is indicative, I think, of one problem that Anthony Perkins and you encountered right there. The film, for the most part, the most effective scenes are not the goriest scenes in the film.
Yes.
And yet there's these very, very obvious gory moments that are sort of just stand out. What was the problem for you and him in terms of we have this marching order to bloody this thing up?
Well, it was we were Tony was very philosophical about these things. It's a studio wants it, you have to give them to this. We'll get into that more at the end, but where this scene was written again. It was a very extended scene, like the shower scene, where you see the girl fall off the toilet, and you see it from her point of view, the pipes under the sink where she's fallen, and again the blood splatting on the wall or the tile. A dollop goes into the toilet bowl or whatever, but you didn't the whole thing with the the neck severing didn't happen, and Tony and I initially did not want a blade going into a body until the end of the movie when he, has his little confrontation with Mama. And that was well, we'll wait till we get there. But again, this is what I loved about this scene with these crazy people running around.
They don't notice.
He now has to dispose of a body, and it's easy when there's only one or two people in the hotel, but and that's when this whole bit came up.
Well, this whole thing with there's one real great benefit to this murder scene is that it leads to one of my favorite scenes in the movie coming up.
Thank you. It's one of mine too.
Yeah, this whole idea that. What I love about is the practicality of Norman having to dispose of a body when he's used to having no one around whatsoever. Now it's like, oh great, now I have to do this, and there's I've got to, for the one time in the entire life of this hotel, there's people here,
right?
And so I think you guys play off the humor of that very, very well here.
It was it was I think, and again getting Norman out of a tight spot, which was. I was very happy with the construction of all the murders and kind of their aftermath, and the ones that didn't happen, like the reversal on the shower scene.
Mm-hmm.
All the set pieces I thought worked very, very well and logically worked. You know, they weren't.
He needs to dust that couch.
Yes, I know.
that was a little bit much on the dust there, but I was like, okay.
Yeah, it looks like a carpet has, or that carpet there hasn't been vacuumed in some
long time. I forget how much time was supposed to have taken place between this and Psycho 2, like about a year?
No, I think it was like shortly after. It was like a few weeks after Mrs. Spool had gone missing.
Oh, okay. So yeah, that's right, because you do see the newspaper.
Yeah.
During the taxidermy scene.
Right.
Well, now that's what we're going to find out. Now it's too hot to argue.
And he's just, I mean, again, his expressions and panic, he's just wonderful. And again, you know, here they are. They're gonna find Mother. He's not worried about the body. He knows the body's safely tucked away. But
right.
It's Mother. That's his worry here. And of course,
his reaction to what's going on here is priceless because he's as baffled as anybody. He really he's concerned. Yeah. He's like, uh-oh, what have I done with her?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Very few actors could have played this that way. I think just he's the total befuddlement, and there's I'll comment on it later. I'm curious about what you think about there's a moment coming up when he's traveling to Dwayne's apartment, which I also find very, very fascinating from an actor's standpoint.
No, I mean, you know, there's a reason it's the Hamlet of horror films. You know?
And then here's the scene that I think anyone, even if you're not necessarily a fan of this movie, you'll find this scene just absolutely perfect. Was this scene performed as you wrote it?
Yes, I mean it's almost it's certainly word for word, and you know the whole thing, and him digging in that ice.
Yeah. I mean, this is a very funny scene, and yet it's so. I mean,
it's macabre too. I mean, that's the point of it. You know, it's macabre, and it's but it's still hysterical. And him and the ice, and
and I love the fact that Norman takes a little bit of delight at the fact that he's just wrong,
and him licking his fingers.
Oh, it's just horrible. It's so wrong, but it's so funny. I can't help but think that this is something Hitchcock would have actually found very funny himself.
Well, I like to flatter myself that these are twists that Hitchcock would enjoy. You know, that they're type of macabre in jokes that he'd kind of just delight in.
Because that's one thing that I think most of the Psycho sequels have accomplished is they don't forget the fact that even the original film has some very dark humor in it. And was that something that you were concerned about while writing, as like making sure not to get so heavy with it that the film kind of collapses under its own weight?
You know, again, it's all about balance for me. And you know, when I saw an opportunity for a good line or a funny bit that wasn't going to collapse the scene's integrity, you know, if it was supposed to be a scary scene, it's going to be a scary scene. But if we can relieve it at the end with a joke or something like that, you know, why not? It's you know, it's the choices writers are presented with and have to make, and the good ones do it right, and the bad ones do it badly. I guess I don't know. You know. But yes, and here he is in this sad little shabby motel with the little decorations going away, and you know, his life falling apart. And here comes your scene, I believe, where Norman is looking for Mama, who's gone missing. And you know, you're not the only one that's commented on. I remember, I think Roger Ebert commented on that moment too.
Oh, really?
Yes, I remember in his
He liked the movie, as I recall.
He did. He was a fan of the movie. Again, it has a lot of fans, I think its reputation has improved over the years.
Oh, immensely so.
I think the intent has it's his candy corn that he just smashed all over the place.
What I do find interesting is that the fact that whenever you're dealing with a sequel, there's going to be a level of expectations. But then after so many years go by, people can watch this film in and of itself and to judge it on its own merits.
Well, again, I don't think a lot of people saw it when it first came out. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we didn't go right into a 4 is because they released it at a very strange time. It was like Valentine's Day or something. February. It's an odd time for it to be released, and it just didn't do as well as expectations had hoped.
There's that look. He's just like, there's almost glee, and he can't wait to get to that room almost. I've just found it a very interesting mix of expressions that are on his face at this particular time, and the music by Carter Burwell just accentuates it so beautifully.
Well, again, it's a wonderful offbeat choice. He could have got the big composers, but to get this guy who's again, it's just everything is off kilter in this movie, including the score. Now
here's a scene where you talk about a very pitched scene in terms of the tone. It's Dwayne, I think, has gone around the bend here a little bit. He's sort of been overtaken. When did you decide to find in the writing process? Because you kind of go back and forth on Dwayne, and obviously he was meant to be the killer originally, but then you changed it. When did you decide to?
Well, I mean, I think there are hints that he's always a little psychotic and sort of dangerously narcissistic. So I mean, that's what I had hoped. I know I had to get him to this point where he can overlook a murder to blackmail for his advantage. Jeff is just it's a strange, bizarre kind of characterization. So I think you can believe it. He's always had that kind of wild-eyed look from the very get-go when he's trying to make Maureen in the car covered in the desert.
Well, it looks like he's clearly been under the. I mean, it's implied, we don't see it, but it's like he's probably done some drugs or something right before all this.
Yeah, I don't think I don't know that he's playing with a full deck to begin with. But yeah, he's probably burned his brain with a few arcane substances, shall we say.
During your time on the set, what did you observe about how Fahey approached the film as an actor? Was he sort of method, or was he just sort of could just turn it on for the scenes and leave it alone?
He was, he was a New York actor, very serious, and he'd come and talk character with me, and I don't know whether he was method or not, but I mean I don't. The few times I saw him on the scene doing a scene, it was you go on set and you do your scene. There was no, I need preparation time or anything like that. I don't remember any of that. So I don't know what his discipline is as an actor. But he was certainly very serious and, could talk about his character. He wasn't coming and saying, "What are we going to do with my hair?"
Yeah.
Which I've had some actors do that,
Right.
This I love. I love this moment where he just stops in the middle of this rant to look at the
pornography.
The pornography, yeah. It's just so outre.
And watch the guitar.
Yes. Watch the guitar. Catchphrase.
Yeah.
But
I do like the fact that he's getting the crap beat out of him. He's going to die, but he's still just concerned about his guitar. Again, this movie, it's very, very funny. Just
it's brilliantly lit, too, here. I mean,
do you think audiences were ready for this kind of approach to this material back then?
Maybe not. I think that's actually a very good point, which I've never really thought about. But yes, I think they were maybe so geared to the Freddy's and the Nightmares on Elm Street that something that I'd like to think has a little intellect and layers above, it sort of transcends your average horror film to, if that's not too pretentious, I hope.
No, I mean, it's
not just like, oh, who are we going to kill? What dead teenager is going to die next? It's not a paint by the numbers kind of horror film.
No.
That may be why it certainly didn't catch on with the kids. I think the aficionados appreciate it.
Well, by and large, a lot of the sort of edgier, kind of more disturbing horror films in the 80s weren't the ones that connected right away. It took them many, many years to finally catch up because the 80s were kind of gravitating. The mainstream was adopting a lot of the horror elements into their own films, and the horror films that were succeeding were the franchises, the Freddys, those types of films, which were more of a kind of an easier roller coaster ride type of thing.
Yeah, and it's the roller coaster motif is one that I abhor, and I've always tried to stay away from. I just give me a plot, give me a story, give me logic, which is my really big thing. It all has to make sense logically to me.
Since you brought it up earlier, I wanted to ask about deconstructing the spool mythology that was introduced in the previous film. How did you arrive at the idea behind undoing that, and yet at the same time not making the whole film about undoing that?
Well, it was the hardest thing to thread, and I don't know how I came, but I knew I had to do it in fits and starts and weave it through and not give them too much exposition in a scene where it's going to be like exposition, and you have to cross-cut it between scenes that are moving towards something. But I just knew I had to get rid of it. So, I don't remember the entire long, convoluted process of it.
And the studio didn't have a problem with undoing what Psycho 2 had put forth?
No, not at all. I mean, if they did, I never heard about it. But I don't know why. I mean, again, Mama has to be Mama. Certainly, I assume it helped 4, and it's the TV series it's on now, and all that sort of stuff. So.
Right. Oh, this moment here.
This is another one that just oof.
Again, you don't see anything. It's just the sound effect and his reaction.
Yeah.
Just the. Oh.
But I love it. And again, this whole thing.
Now, this is this moment always really kind of freaked me out.
I don't think this is in the original script.
I was wondering. I was going to ask if you wrote this.
Tony's touch. I don't. Which again, it's one of those things that just is. It's just creepy and strange, kissing those cold
frozen dead woman that he murdered.
It's like,
yeah,
this
is not user friendly stuff we're dealing with here in this movie.
No, it isn't. It's really going into and the scene coming up is again, it's another set piece that I love, and because we never really see him going to the lake to dump the body.
No.
And
the impression was it was always just kind of out behind the house almost.
Yeah, and this thing, I mean, again, his expression on his face, and then that light comes in, that green light of Jesus comes up, and you see the plastic bag in the back.
Dwayne is not so easy to kill after all.
Yeah.
Did you think, because the marketing campaign for Psycho 3 was interesting, but I'm not sure necessarily it sold the film as being as unique as it was. What did you think of it?
I don't remember much about it. I do remember the catchphrase, Norman's all right, but Mother's off her rocker again.
Yeah.
Which I don't know. I may have actually uttered somewhere and someone took that. I have a vague memory of that being my whole pitch at one point, But I did like that catchphrase. I mean, which, I mean, again, it sort of tells you the tone. There is almost a humorous kind of tone there. But what I love about this scene, and why I put it in, it's Norman going to hell to meet his demons.
Right, because this is where he's put everybody.
Yeah, and here he is in the swamp with them all. And
no, this is a very because I mean he's going to encounter all the bodies that he's been storing down there, and and just the little touches like the fact that there's bicycle tires down here, which indicates there's other murders that we don't even know about that have happened in the interim that we will never know about.
Yeah, and there she is. There's Red and that screen, that silent screen with the bubbles. It's just great.
So now we're heading into the final act of the picture,
Yeah.
in which it's amazing to me how certain films, when you start watching them, you can just get a sense for things are not going to end well pretty much for anybody.
Well, if it's done well, by this, I mean, my theory is I always like a long first act, the second act that's shorter, and by the time you get to the third act, you're going hell bent for leather, and you're not stopping for anything at this point.
Right.
You're just gonna, the momentum is going, and everything should at this point become almost inexorable. And this is the one scene where Tony and I disagreed about.
Oh, okay.
And it played a little differently. What I wanted here in this scene was him to kill Maureen with a kiss. I mean, he kills her, he kisses her, and he stabs her at the same time. And Tony said, no, Norman never kills. Well, my idea at this point was that he can't tell the difference between Norman and Mama anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's his character. Maybe he knows better. So we had a debate about it. And again, very civilized, calm debate. I mean, this is supposed to have been she was supposed to be in her mother's robe. He brought her mother's clothes.
Oh, okay.
There was a scene
Well, that would have been an interesting twist.
Well, it was a scene where, I mean, there was a section of the script where it says, he looks at her in the robe. She's naked under the robe. Mother's robe. Mother. And that was it. and
Right.
and you knew it was doomed. But anyway, so they come up here, and this is the we had to get him. He has to kill her, and it's Mother's voice that
sets them
and
off.
I actually had her whipped out of the robe, and this Cupid down here was actually, I mean, it was a set piece in the original film.
Right.
So I kind of get my killed with a kiss anyway. It's the Cupid impaled on Cupid's arrow there.
Right, and plus her falling down the stairs.
Yeah,
is an echo of
we got the
Arbogast kill.
The Martin Balsam homage there as
Right.
well, which we've been playing off of those things. We do the variation on the shower scene. Now we've done the variation on the Balsam down the stairs backwards. So it worked out very well, and I'm happy with that compromise.
In the end, do you think he was right?
Probably, because again, we got the homage. Mother does do the killing, but she is in his embrace. I mean, that's the thing I wanted. I wanted I wanted a romantic moment, I think, and I think that played out very well. I mean, it's a tragic moment. These people, so desperate to be together, and this is what happens. So thwarted yet again, poor Norman.
Because it is a sad situation because both of them feel that they're each other's salvation, and boy, are they not.
And
They're
and it comes to this. I mean, this is what I love about it. I mean, we go back to his. Mother. He now blames Mother for the death. So we
Right.
probably get to that scene much more logical than had we gotten to my killed with a kiss moment. Because he's really pissed
turned
off
against
with
her
Mom.
finally.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, he's gotten enough chutzpah to sort of take her on at this point, as we shall soon see.
and then re-entering the Venable character, who I still, it's funny. There's a moment coming up where I was actually kind of back on her side to a large degree,
Yeah.
but then she comes in, and when she sees Maureen's dead body,
Yeah. Yeah.
she just calls her a stupid, dumb girl. And I remember in the theater when I saw it, it's like, well, up yours, lady. God,
No, but
Just
it's
like-
kind of what I mean, that's the line. I wrote it, and I think it's it's kind of what a cynical, you knew this guy's history. Why would you do this to yourself? How naive.
I'm not
how
saying she's not
stupid
right to some
Yeah.
degree, but at the same time,
I
it's like,
know.
oh, I almost want Mother to kill her. No,
Well,
I just,
she's the well, that almost came up. This is as we were getting into this
Mhm.
moment, and since we're here, I'll start talking about it. I got a call from Tony on the set, and they were filming these scenes here. And he says, the studio wants one of those Brian De Palma moments where,
like
the
a
hand
Carrie.
shoots out of the grave
Yeah.
and Carrie, one of these jolts at the end of the movie. And so we just start discussing it. And I'm going, oh, no, please don't do this. And he starts talking, well, we can kill the reporter. We can kill the priest who was actually in this scene. He's no longer in. They cut him out.
Oh yeah, he's not. Yeah, he's only in a couple scenes before.
Well, he
this.
was in this. He comes in at the end to sort of calm Norman down, and tell him it's the truth about Mrs. Spool. But that's not here anymore. And anyway, so I'm just seeing this bloodbath happening with all these people dying for no reason, just to get a shock moment. And so I'm thinking on my feet. I'm thinking, okay, what can we do? What can we do that won't ruin the integrity of the movie? Because I have always looked at this movie as Norman's journey to light.
Mm-hmm.
Even though he's done these killings, even at the end of the movie, he's going to be locked up forever. He has returned to sanity. This is a great moment coming up here. I'm straightening the picture,
I like that.
which is so perfect for Mother and Norman.
They keep up the house.
Yeah, exactly. Doesn't dust, but he'll straighten the pictures.
No, they don't dust, but the pictures are going to be straight.
But I mean, her spewing. I love her spewing, having to spew all this exposition out.
It's an interesting way to do it. It's a very interesting way to do it. It's just like she's got limited time left. She better start telling what's going on.
Scene, let's let a scene do more than one thing is always my theory, Anyway,
And I do applaud you for that, because usually you have to bog down the film with all this exposition.
yeah, I don't want to stop the film for exposition. The exposition has to be keeping the forward motion of the movie going.
So she's saying it, backing away from the knife. That was
Yeah.
a very. I give you full props for that. That was a great idea.
Thank you. But anyway, Norman, he's made all these suggestions about the bloodbath, and I'm thinking. And this is, well, I'm going to interrupt myself again. We'll get to that. We'll get to the ending, explaining the ending in a minute here. Because this is the only place I ever wanted a knife to go into a body, is when he stabs Mother. His victory over Mother. Mm-hmm. And that's why I call it his journey to light. He has suddenly exorcised his demons. He is totally sane. He's going to be locked up for the rest of his life.
But he's cured.
He's sane. And that's why at the end, when the sheriff is taking him down the steps, as we will see in a few minutes, he says, I believed in you, boy. I trusted you. And now you're going to be locked up for life. And Norman says, but I'll be free. I'll finally be free. And the last shot of the movie was supposed to be, you pan up to Mama's window and you go through, the curtains are blowing in the breeze, and the empty rocker is going back and forth in the window. And that was the end of the movie. So to give them my Brian De Palma twist, and to save it from having more corpses, I said, no, let's do this. Sheriff takes him down. He says, I'll finally be free. I'll be free. I'll finally be free. They put him in the car. And as he's driving away in the back seat, we do one of those things from Schyko, where, when Simon Oakland is giving all his exposition at the end, and we pan into Norman and the little skull overlay, and we see that demonic grin come up on Norman's face in the original, when he's sitting there and says, I'll be quiet, I won't hurt a fly,
Right.
Well, I said, we'll do it. So we'll pan in on Norman. He'll bring up that little demonic grin, and from under his coat, as we will see here in just a second, as his eyes will swerve around, and from under the coat comes Mother's hand, which she starts stroking. And I told him all this because I figured, look, they'll see it doesn't work. It can easily be cut, and we'll go back to the window and the empty rocker, and Norman will have his journey to light. Well, as you can see, that didn't happen.
Yeah, because I mean, it's a really nice image. I think it's a fun, but it doesn't really make sense.
It negates everything that's come before.
Right. Yeah.
Basically.
Just 5 seconds ago, he's saying he's finally going to be free, and well, maybe not.
Yeah. So it's always kind of gnawed my soul, but
in terms of compromises, I guess it's not the worst thing.
No, I mean, again, it's better than the reporter being killed and the priest being killed and, Norman being totally crackers.
Right. So as the credits begin to roll here, looking back on the film now, it was 1986, so it's been, in a few years, it'll be 30 years since this movie was made. How do you feel about the film's reputation and now compared to what it was back then, and how do you feel about when you meet fans who come up and talk to you about the movie now? Is it enhanced your memories of the experience?
Well, I mean, again, I've always had fond memories of this experience, and it's again, it's nice to see the movie being remembered fondly. I mean, and again, I go do a horror convention or something, which I do very rarely because writers don't really make money. They're wanting, some stuntman who played Jason to sign their machete. Those guys rake it in. But I again, it's a movie of all my studio films. I think it's the one I'm fondest of, simply because I had the best time on it. So this is, I have nothing but good feelings for this, and Tony. I have a picture in my office, in my library, that's signed by him. It says, "Let's keep this act together." And
can't ask for better than that.
Yeah, I wish we had, because it was a wonderful collaboration. We I think saw essentially the same movie. He was very respectful of the script and certainly my contributions to it. So it was a very good experience, which they all aren't in Hollywood. But and he died too soon.
Yeah, I agree. Well, as the credits are coming to a close here, I want to thank everyone for listening, and a special thanks to you, Mr. Pogue, for taking the time out to share your memories of the making of this film. It's been a real pleasure, and I can't thank you enough for sharing your memories with us today.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate it.
Take care, everyone. Thanks for listening.